各位觀眾大家好，歡迎收睇26分鐘見證實錄。閱讀障礙又稱為失讀症，係一種喺智力正常嘅情況之下，卻係喺閱讀同書寫方面出現困難嘅學習障礙。而數據就顯示本國大約有1至2成嘅民眾受到影響。喺今集嘅節目裏面，我哋就會同大家認識一位人士，佢喺閱讀障礙之中成長，並且經歷咗種種嘅困難同埋誤解。咁等我哋一齊去聽聽佢係點樣一步步咁走過呢一段艱辛嘅旅程。
The system currently does not promote early identification, and the best thing for people with dyslexia is to get identified as early as possible.
We can early screen. How do we early screen? But then what?
But if the school can't put in place targeted intervention like learning assistance because they don't have a diagnosis, we end up being stuck in these sort of endless, frustrating loops.
The teacher at that point told us that Tierney was in fact just lazy and that she was not dyslexic. She was too smart to be dyslexic.
I was just a little bit confused why they couldn't help me and frustrated with myself and why I couldn't read at the time. I realized mostly when I was in probably kindergarten when they'd send home books and I had no idea what anything said, but I could say every single letter and know every single sound to it, but I just couldn't put them together.
Well, my husband is dyslexic, so it was on our radar fairly early. I would say grade 1 we first started noticing things. I mentioned it to her teacher at that point. Unfortunately, at the time, there wasn't anything so glaring. You know, all kids are learning language at that point. So her teacher at that point did keep her in at recess and lunch some days and tried to do some extra reading with her. So we were grateful for that. Grade 2, we again mentioned it to the teacher that we thought she was struggling with literacy issues and we assumed it was dyslexia. Again, because her father is dyslexic and there is a genetic factor there. The teacher at that point told us that Tierney was in fact just lazy and that she was not dyslexic. She was too smart to be dyslexic was actually what we were told, and that she needed to apply herself more. So we were kind of left wondering and not sure what to do for a while.
而當家長同埋老師仲喺度疑惑緊 Tierney 係咪患有閱讀障礙嘅時候，小小年紀嘅 Tierney 早已經獨自開始佢嘅掙扎。
I didn't fully understand it at the time. I was just a little bit confused why they couldn't help me and frustrated with myself and why I couldn't read at the time.
而為咗唔喺課堂上出醜 ，Tierney 發展出自己嘅一套方法。
I memorized books, so we'd have to read in front of the class, and there was probably 3 or 4 books that I just had memorized in my head, and I'd pretend that I could read all the time because I didn't want to be thought of stupid or dumb. And then I would go to reading group, and then there'd be a new book, and then I'd freeze because I didn't know how to read the new book. And they'd give me a bookmark that had 4 different ways of guessing. It was read ahead and look at the word again and see what you think it was to make sense. Look at the photo, look at the surroundings in the pages before, and then look at the title of the book. And those were the 4. And it just made me a little confused why that was the way that they were deciding to teach when there's so many other things that they could have been doing.
但係閱讀障礙對 Tierney 嘅影響唔單止係喺課堂上嘅尷尬，佢甚至經常唔想返學。
I would pretend to be sick just about every other day to get out of it. Or if we had a spelling test, I'd be like, Mom, I can't go to school, I'm sick, just because I did not want anyone to see my mark I'd get on the spelling test because I didn't know how to spell basically any words. And I'd just be so embarrassed of my reading and writing that I'd try to get out of it in any way I could.
Well, I mean, we were really disheartened that it had taken such a long time to get any support for her. Again, there is a process in place and it was not followed, which was obviously upsetting. By this point, Tierney was having so many issues. She was having stomach aches every day. We learned a bit later that she was beginning to have panic attacks at school. She would have been about 8 years old, and she was having panic attacks every day in the bathroom at school, which obviously, you know, no parent wants to see their child struggling like that. It's terrible.
而呢一個情況一直持續到小學3年級，屋企人先至開始尋找校園以外嘅幫忙。
I think towards the end of that year, it might have been in the summer, I actually reached out to the public library in the Fraser Valley because I wasn't getting anywhere with the school. They weren't offering us any support or any help. So I called the Fraser Valley Library and I said, look, I think she's dyslexic and we're not getting any support and I don't really know what to do. So the librarian gave us some kind of step-by-step. You're going to go to your doctor, you're going to get a referral to a pediatrician. From the pediatrician, you're going to get a referral to do testing. And that was their advice because we weren't able to get support through the school. So by the 3rd grade, I think I went into the year just stating it as a fact. Instead of saying, I think she's dyslexic, I started saying, she is dyslexic, we are waiting for testing, we need support. And her one teacher that year was really supportive and did everything she could to help, but she was seemingly met with issues from support for her on her behalf. So the resource team refused to speak to me or meet with us, and she was getting brick-walled, the teacher as well. Nobody was able to kind of get through to that.
眼見女兒嘅情況越嚟越唔好 ，Jessica 決定唔再等待，而係主動幫女兒尋找答案。
I think it was the spring of that year. I think it was March. We finally got to her testing. So we paid for testing privately. At this point, we had still never seen a resource teacher. We had never had school-based teams, which is in our district is what they're supposed to do. It's supposed to go to a school-based teams if a parent raises a concern. That had never happened. So her testing was completed, and we got the results, I think it was 2 weeks later, from the psychologist who told us that Tierney was in the bottom 2 percentile for reading and writing. So at this point, you know, they're telling me that I'm overreacting, that nothing is wrong, there's other kids who have higher needs than her. And then we get the testing results back, which was pretty much devastating. So her IQ is kind of average, above average. She was sitting at about a 110 in her IQ, and her reading and writing was bottom 2 percentile for her age. Her psychologist actually told us that she did not know how our child was functioning at school. With those kind of numbers coming out. And she did something that she said she normally doesn't do, and she called the school and told them that Tierney needed support immediately.
而嗰一張診斷報告對於呢個家庭嚟講，唔單止係感情上嘅衝擊，亦都係一筆沉重嘅負擔。
I mean, the testing at that time would have been about $2,500. My husband had recently been in a bad car accident, so it was definitely a huge financial burden for us. Obviously, we're her parents. We would do anything that we can and that we need to do to get her the support she needs. But it was a huge financial burden on us. And when we got the results, you know, I wanted it to be bittersweet. I mean, it was bittersweet. I wanted it to be something where I felt, you know, haha, I was right, but it didn't feel that way. It felt devastating to see on paper what we knew to be true and what was not being recognized with the school.
而喺確診咗閱讀障礙之後，母親 Jessica 亦都立即採取咗行動。
After the diagnosis, we actually told them to please just leave her be. She was so emotionally scarred from all of her experiences that we really just wanted to get her to the end of that year. We actually enrolled her in a different school the following year. Our district offers a distributed learning program that is part of the district. So it was 2 days in school, 3 days homeschooled. So I actually left, you know, my job so that I could homeschool her.
My mom started tutoring me with an Orton Gillingham-based program in like the summer between grade 3 and grade 4, and I was completely illiterate at that point. So it was definitely a challenge at first because I was so confused on everything, but we could automatically see a difference probably 2 or 3 months into it. So I felt very relieved after I could read even a tiny bit.
現時喺屋企人持續嘅支持同佢自己嘅努力之下 Tierney 嘅生活正係一點一滴咁出現咗改變。
It makes me very relieved that now I don't have the same issues. I still definitely am not at the point where some kids are, and I probably will never be just because of the delay that I had, but it's definitely completely better now and I can help many other kids. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is now that I'm at mostly grade level stuff, I can look around in a classroom and see the kids that look like they have dyslexia and I can flag them out and tell someone and then they can get support much easier.
對好多閱讀障礙者嚟講啊，親友嘅理解同埋陪伴呢，係佢哋走過困境嘅主要動力。而教育系統能否提供適切嘅支援，更加係直接影響到佢哋未來嘅發展。咪下一節翻嚟，我哋就會同大家去了解本國喺閱讀障礙支援方面，仲有邊啲喺制度上嘅缺口同挑戰。歡迎翻嚟節目時間。患上閱讀障礙並不代表一個人唔夠努力，亦都同智商無關。佢係一種神經發展性嘅學習障礙。咁點樣先至能夠及早發現閱讀障礙？而醫學同埋教育界又有啲乜嘢嘅建議去幫助有需要嘅孩童呢？卑斯閱讀障礙協會 Dyslexia BC 創辦人 Kathy McMillan 指出，該協會係一個由家長同埋關注閱讀障礙議題嘅個人組成嘅草根組織，致力於改善資源不足嘅情況。佢指出，學校應該普及對學齡兒童進行閱讀障礙嘅早期檢查。佢強調，早期識別對於閱讀障礙者嘅幫助至關重要。
The system currently does not promote early identification, and the best thing for people with dyslexia is to get identified as early as possible so that you get access to remediation interventions as early as possible. Not only do the interventions and remediation help as early as possible, it also helps the person with the dyslexia get over any anxiety or my daughter with severe dyslexia was diagnosed very young in grade 1. So she had lots of time to realize that if she used her accommodations, if she had access to remediation, all these things were going to help her. Whereas my son got diagnosed in middle school, right at the height of, social anxiety about fitting in and all that kind of stuff. And it was harder for him to accept his diagnosis, I think, because of his age. I just think the more time you have to understand yourself and get used to identifying with who you are, it's easier to accept your challenges and your strengths, and a lot easier to get over whatever challenges you have.
不過，對於是否應該對閱讀障礙進行早期嘅識別，閱讀基金會診所創辦人兼負責人 Stephen Trush 教授就保持保留嘅態度。
So I think that, the two things are really important is early screening, but then what? Two questions. We can early screen. How do we early screen? But then what? See, so there's lots of early screening batteries out there, dozens of them. And the United States has been into early screening for many, many years. We're starting to get into it more now in Canada, and the different provinces all have different ways of screening. So, but the idea is a good one, is that you want to pick out those children who are likely to develop some sort of reading issue and tackle it before it becomes a reading issue. So early screening, we can identify which children are at risk. When it comes to what we do about it, we're still going to be doing not as well as we could be, I think, because we're going to still wind up with lots of phonics programs, which are better than no phonics and better than guessing, but not as good as it could be if we went from the speech to print orientation. And there's several programs that fulfill that particular orientation.
卑斯大學醫學院臨床副教授及社區兒科醫生 Jennifer Balfour 指出，因為目前卑斯省仲未有針對閱讀障礙嘅統一標準篩查程序，家長如果發現子女入學之後出現異常嘅表現，應該高度重視並且及時尋求專業協助。
Once children have joined school, started in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, there may be a variety of things. Sometimes specifically the school will say, oh, delays in reading. Sometimes it's not quite as obvious as that. Sometimes what I hear about first is behavior issues. School failure, reluctance to go to school, outbursts, temper tantrums, tearfulness, anxiety, worries. You know, we say a lot in pediatrics, children really communicate with behavior. And when their circuits are overloaded or too much is being asked of them, then we tend to see it come out in terms of behavior. They don't come home and say, wow, I'm really having trouble with reading, and while all the other kids are doing fine. It really comes out first in some of those other things that may highlight that this place where they're spending, the majority of their day is actually a place they're not feeling very competent or similar to their peers.
此外 ，Jennifer Balfour 仲提到，閱讀障礙喺早期可能會有一啲嘅徵兆。
From my point of view, a pediatrician looks after children right from baby to 18 years of age. Some of the very early signs, sometimes we see delayed language as an early sign that can be associated with difficulty with language-based academics. So it may be delayed talking or differences in communication. Perhaps that may be associated with differences in language-based skills. Sometimes we see early features of difficulty with phonemic awareness, such as difficulty with rhyming. So sometimes difficulty with rhyming might be an early sign. And then family history is one of those things as well I think about. So learning disabilities can run in families. So if I hear that another family member has had difficulty or delays in reading or other aspects of academics, I'm probably going to be more alert to it.
佢指出，現時嘅醫療同教育體系超出負荷，而且運作混亂，成為咗閱讀障礙早期識別嘅阻礙。
Again, it seems an unnecessary step to me for the Ministry of Education and for a school to feel a bit stuck in getting a real plan in place for a child just to do that simple step of extra help. I hear this all the time. Families coming to me when I say, wow, you're telling me that your child is a year behind in reading. Are they getting extra help? Are they getting learning assistance? 100% of the time, essentially, maybe 98%, the parent will say, no, the school says they can't give him extra help until he has a diagnosis. And so then we have to sit back and say, okay, well, there doesn't appear to be a medical diagnosis, example, anemia, migraines, asthma, seizures, just for example. If the diagnosis is dyslexia or another learning disability, well, the only way they're going to get that diagnosis is by having an assessment. They need to have a psychoeducational assessment by an educational psychologist. They shouldn't have to see me first before they get on a wait list to get diagnosed with a problem. Part of what that educational psychologist needs to consider is this child behind in reading despite targeted intervention? But if the school can't put in place targeted intervention like learning assistance because they don't have a diagnosis, we end up being stuck in these sort of endless frustrating loops.
佢強調，唯有政策協調同埋部門合作同步進行，小朋友先至能夠真正獲得佢哋所需而且應得嘅支持。
It's incredibly important that we think about this intersection between health and the Ministry of Education, and that we have policy and collaboration and what I would call joined up governance, so that we have crosstalk between these ministries, so that we don't feel, and when I use that word pinball, it feels more like a game of hot potato. You take it, no, you take it, no, you take it. Go see your doctor, see if they're healthy. Oh, they're healthy, back to you, school. Oh, let's put some, let's see if we can get a designation. Oh, back to you, medical professional. Can you please write us a letter saying you should have an educational psychologist? It just ends up being batted around quite a bit.
對此，卑斯閱讀障礙協會創辦人 Macmillan 指出，家長如果能夠積極咁掌握到身邊資源，並且學習點樣為子女發聲，係支持佢哋克服困難嘅關鍵。
So know your kid, first of all, realize what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and what is dyslexia? Like how does it present? What can I do to make it better? What resources are in my neighborhood? What resources aren't in my neighborhood? What programs? Go to the district, find out if there are special programs for your child, because some districts don't have them advertised readily on their websites. And once you go to the district office and start asking targeted questions, you might get more answers. Take a course in how to advocate. I've taken a couple courses. I started when my daughter was about grade 3 or 4. Reach out to other parents and other organizations like Dyslexia BC that have parent supports, like information nights, so that you get more informed. And know how your school district operates. Like, try to work with them, try to work collaboratively, anticipate what their response is going to be when you try to advocate for something. And know that as a parent you do have rights, and that your child and family have rights within the school system, especially with a diagnosis, because dyslexia and other learning disabilities are covered under all our special education laws in BC.
此外，閱讀基金會診所創辦人兼負責人 Stephen Trush 亦都表示，閱讀障礙係可以透過正確方法去克服。
Welcome to the journey if you're such a parent, because you're going to experience all kinds of things. So I would say that if your child is, well, it doesn't matter what age they are. What you need to do is start at least teaching them that there is a system to the English language, that words that they look at can be thought of as having sounds. That means that you as the parent or the teacher have to know how to pronounce those 44 phonemes. You can go to YouTube and get that. Pronounce the phoneme for the child, then have the child segment any word that they're looking at into the sounds and show them how the sound to letter relationship works. Some of your children will just explode with that. They'll suddenly say, oh, that makes total sense. Why didn't we, why doesn't anybody teach us that? So those two building blocks, the segmenting of words into phonemes, the relationship between that phoneme and the letter can explode the code, as some people say, for many students. Others will need more direct repetition, but it should be happening fairly quickly. If it's not happening quickly, then you need to find somebody who understands the reading process and what to do about it if there's an issue. There are a lot of clinics that offer their services.
同時，閱讀障礙者 Tierney 亦都鼓勵同樣有閱讀困難嘅人唔好氣餒。
Dyslexic people are not stupid, and that they just need some extra support, and they just need some reading science and to learn things and learn the why in English, because that's definitely something that you need to learn, and you can't just read. You have to have some extra help. I hope by the time that I'm a teacher, there'll already be reading science in classrooms, but if there's not, I hope to do teach with reading sciences, so that those kids can get the support early on, and so that they can know the rules and know how to read in those early grades, so then once they get to the needing to read to learn, they'll be able to do that and won't have the same struggles as me.
好啦，今集嘅節目時間就差唔多啦。咁如果觀眾對我哋嘅節目有啲乜嘢意見嘅話，係好歡迎大家以電郵嘅方式同我哋聯絡㗎。我哋嘅電郵地址係 mag26@fairchildtv.com。如果觀眾想上網重溫今集嘅節目，亦都可以上到去我哋嘅網站3w.fairchildtv.com， 點擊節目重溫一欄就可以睇得返㗎啦。下星期同一時間再同大家見面，晚安。